Okay, and we're back. Fast transition into the exhibition for solar evocation. I keep saying evocation. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Evocation.
Evocation? Mm-hmm. I love public speaking, and I'm really good at it. Okay, so I'd like to introduce you now to Azza El Siddique, who was born in Khartoum, Sudan, and received an MFA from Yale University of Art in 2019, and a BFA from Ontario College of Art and Design University in 2014. She has participated in residencies at Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture in Maine, Ament Foundation, and Harbourfront Centre in Ontario. Her work has been featured in The New Yorker, Canadian Art, Border Crossings, and Art Forum. Past exhibitions include Begin in Smoke, End in Ashes, Let Me Hear You Sweat, Material Tells, Raw, and GTA. Is that the name of the show? Is that the
Grand Theft Auto? No. Greater Toronto Art.
Greater Toronto Art, yeah. Good times. As well as the Museum of Contemporary Art in Toronto. And I'll pass it on to you, Azza. Take it away.
All right. Thank you. I'm Azza El Siddique. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Clark Center, for having me. And it's really lovely hearing Lauren and Ruth's Faye's talk. So this is solar evocation. I think just right off the jump, the floor is slipcast, and the platform that you see is wood covered in slipcast. So that's a big question that I get. So regarding solar evocation, it's based on a precursor of this funerary text. It's a coffin text that is called the Book of Two Ways. So within coffins, during ancient Egyptian and Nubian times, they had maps of how to navigate the underworld or the netherworld. And for myself, I took classes in the Egyptology department while I was at Yale. And for me, it felt like everything that I was thinking about all kind of like coincided into the religion philosophy that was happening through like ancient Egyptian and Nubian religions. And because they had this really profound sense of entropy and how that death and decay was inevitable, but there were ways that they would try to control and slow it down. And just the ways that they made meaning of this and the world was like super poetic. And it also was like kind of like the forefront of like, for myself, like just really seeing the power dynamics and like the systems and structures that are set up in ways that oppress and also console us in this kind of slippery form that which just essentially like explains life and where we are. And the things that I would find really interesting in the research is sort of the the lineage of like how we understand the world, or like the ways that two different cultures and ideas can also come to make meaning of the world in like a certain specific way. So when I do a lot of research through like reading academic text, anthropology, but also what I really love reading is folklore and mythology, specifically in like African folklore and mythology, and just kind of finding these kind of parallels and connections of how, for instance, in African folklore, the god that created humans was a potter, and so is in ancient Egyptian culture, it's the same thing. And I'm just kind of thinking like, oh, how does like this come to be? But then learning that ancient Egyptian religion and culture comes from like a Neolithic African culture. So kind of seeing these sort of currents and how things, like these sort of like ripple effects, these transcultural exchanges that happen, and these cultures being created. So I guess that's kind of a long-winded way to say the things that I'm interested in, but specifically going back to this piece, as I was saying, I was looking at the Book of the Two Ways, and for me, the reason why I was really interested in that, it's the precursor to this, to essentially the final form of the 12-hour journey of how to navigate the afterlife, which is called the Amduat. So within my research, I was reading, I'm sorry, I forgot his name, but his dissertation, where he translates the Book of Two Ways, coffin text, but from 3 different eras. And I'm also interested in entropy through communication as well, of what gets left behind and what carries forward. So within that, and these are all spells. These are spells that you would recite while you're navigating the afterlife. And it's kind of this, it's almost kind of like this video game in this sort of way where, you know, you'll come across demons. And it also really boils down to this idea that knowledge is power. Because if you have that demon's name, that is a thing that allows you to cross. So while I was doing my research, I was taking these spells and reworking them into the video projection that you see. So the things that I was really interested in while I was reading and researching was the sort of spells and parts of it that felt really visceral. So references to the body and like references to the land, just something to kind of like bring you back in this way. And another aspect that was really important for me regarding the video work was this encircling, because when it came to magic, it was really important in order for the spell to succeed as this cyclical aspect, which goes back to the idea and the metaphors of like the circle of life and so on. This ability, the whole reason why you participate in this is to be reborn every day with the sun. And the structure that you see on the floor is actually a map of the Book of Two Ways. So it's in sections, like the text, which are the images, the hieroglyphs are in sections within that. And the vessels and the clay, not only like the reference back to the gods and the mythology, but vessels were also used to communicate with the dead. So if you had lost someone during that time, you would write to them on like the vessels and leave them at the grave or temple where the loved one that you're trying to communicate with is. So also thinking about that, it goes back to like that circle again, like the form of the vessel. Yeah, I think that's kind of sums up the installation.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that was very like, no, I actually don't know any words. I'm trying to say illumination, but like as an adjective, illuminating. There we go. I got there.
Okay.
It was very illuminating when I scratched the record. Try again.
Maybe there's one more thing I wanted to add about the text was, it's like the font and like the pace that I was going for is the breaking news headline. So like going back to that idea of like communication. Yeah.
Great. That's also what I was thinking of. It's very like, yeah, those like news segments on TV, that's sort of like the repeating messages, because this is a loop, right, of 24 minutes, you said?
Yeah, it's a 24-minute video.
When you were selecting the text to like, you know, curate your own like video spell book, how did you make that selection?
Well, like I was saying, I was searching for things that felt really visceral within the spells, and also the sort of slipperiness that happens, like, oh, like who is talking, who is like performing, and then there's also some clues where there's like a part that says like repeat, you know? So, yeah.
Was there like any like particular passages that really like struck you? Because there are a few that I've seen that was like, oh my, like I feel it was really, I guess visceral is the right word. Yeah,
I mean, there was a lot. I think there is I feel like most of them are in there, you know? I think the one that talks about splitting in two, like I am the one that split you in two.
In terms of like how you produce like the like slip in the floor, like there is like a really interesting like motif that appears like through like across the floor. I'm sure this is like, well, to me, I think I can like feel that it evokes like lots of different other kinds of materials, like like either like water or sand. But was there like a particular like motif that you were going for or that trying to achieve?
I mean, I was like on my knees with my hands. So there was something about like the labor and essentially touching every aspect within that space that I'm still like thinking through. But in its own way, I kind of see it as like my mark on like the space that is left behind.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the labor being on your hands and knees, and I already feel the pain in my
I was tired.
Yeah, like I'm just like reflecting on like, oh your poor back, mine is fine. You mentioned like the sort of like the pottery that's like left in these like sections of the Book of Two Ways. Can you talk a little bit about the vessels that are on the outside? So we have a couple in the corners of the room that are broken and.
Yeah, I was just really thinking about excavation sites because I look at a lot of images of excavation sites, and I feel like for me this installation is quite different from what I've done in the past in the way of like the height within the work. So this sort of like lowering, but I just always find it that like the things that we do find in those spaces are ceramics, the things that are left over, and so
Thanks. Are there any audience questions?
Hi.
Hi. I have so many questions I don't even know. So please, if anybody has any others, just raise your hands, because otherwise we're going to be here all day. As I stupidly stepped on one of the pieces, and I crushed this kind of like funk one. And that kind of made me realize that this is like so different, because what you've usually done with these vessels is you have a water element, right, that runs throughout the duration of the exhibition, and it would like literally dismantle, like erase these vessels over time. This time it's more, I feel like it's more allegorical, like you're kind of distributing these vessels. Sometimes looks like an excavation site, and we can guess nobody is going to stupidly step on these because they're quite protected. But in a way, these are like sacrificial, you know, pieces around. I wonder how you make sense of that. And looking at this, and then I've been reading your text all this time. I can't help but feel, I mean, you describe them as visceral selections. I can't help but feel they're also autobiographical somehow. And I can't also help but compare what you have in there and like the choices you made. There was like something about ruins being cities. And so I was trying to make sense of this. I'm like, when I first entered, because of the color, I'm like, oh, it's a concrete foundation. And then I saw the pottery, and I'm like, no, this is like a ruin, you know, like an excavation site. And then you said it's like the map of the underworld. And so in a way, there are all of like this slippage happening between the text, the structure, our reading, literally slipping into space, right, and crushing these objects around us. To what extent do you want to leave the interpretation of the work open? Because I feel you're also like an artist who's super meticulous and who knows exactly what she wants. But I feel this is like a different thing for you this time.
Yeah.
Like you really opened up the room, let's say, for interpretation.
Yeah, I am always like, I've always been open to interpretation. Like, I'm excited to hear how someone else takes in the space. So there isn't anything, I mean, I don't want to ever dictate how someone should like feel or like fully like think about the work. And I also don't want to make things didactic, because like I have faith in like the viewer and their ability to engage with the work if they choose to, and if they choose not to, that's also fine. You know? Yeah, but that's also, I feel like an interesting point that you brought up about the slippage and the stepping. You're not the first, you know? I've had an email already about it. And there's this sort of, the things within my installation, I do think about the ways of control and how to like control people to work through this space. And with like a piece like that, in its own way, because you're navigating the space and then you're kind of brought back in to be like, oh shit, like I just stepped on the art, you know, like and then it's just like, and I think it kind of like brings you back to like really focusing on the way that you're navigating space.
Hello. Yeah, I just wanted, I was curious to hear you expand on this idea of, there's this line that says, ruin will be cities and vice versa.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned like the archaeological site, and then with this book that's talking about passage of life and death, where do you find like ruins sit within all this?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I've had a really great conversation. Like, I had a really wonderful studio visit where I came to realize, because some of my other previous work is like very large, where it could almost be considered monumental, but I'd never use that word because I feel that ruins are actually the honest word for like monuments, because of that, and it's like inevitable that this is where it's going to end.
Hi, Azza. Thanks so much.
Hi.
I just maybe need a little bit of clarification on something. The Book of Two Ways is a hieroglyphic text.
Yes.
Is that right? And this structure is sort of like an inscriptional grid on the image that the hieroglyphic figures are organized through?
Yeah, so this is like the way that you would read it. So it'd be like, like that first section, you're gonna encounter this demon or this god, and it continues on like that.
I don't know if this is a fair question, because it seems really situational, but I'm curious about the decision to let people sit on it, and what it means to displace the hieroglyphic figures with corporeal figures, and have the text be kind of abstract projections on the wall. Like, there's something really compelling, I think, in the movements you're making between the ancient text, its form and structure, the material and bodies that are engaging with your text, and the space that you've given us to kind of look through. And maybe you don't have an answer for that, but there's something really compelling about that choice.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I feel that for myself, like, to create this form and to allow people to sit on it, I think there is, like, for myself, I've always been interested in, like, the slippage and the control. Nobody knew to sit on it until you saw someone sitting on it. And so that's essentially with my other installations. There is this sort of thing that happens where you're not sure whether you can be in that space, or you can or you can't. So that's so it's set up in this way where it is essentially like up to the viewer of how they choose to interact with it, And I think there's also the things that, like, I also, that kind of like moves back into like the research, is that in ancient Egyptian and like the Nubian culture, there's no kind of finite way of like specifically understanding something, so that like certain gods could have like these multiple narratives behind them that don't necessarily make sense, because like I guess in maybe like Eurocentric ways, it's like, oh no, this needs to explain this and this and this, but there's a lot of like room for interpretation, and there's a lot of like inversing where like heaven can be like, or like the netherworlds is like up above and like down below, and then in the place of reeds, so there's not this like definite thing, and which I think also like happens with the inversions of the text, and also within the space where it's like can I sit on it? Like, I stepped on art, and so on.
Yeah, I think there's some really good shifts between body and text and object, architecture, abstract, and portfolio forms. I think that's sort of maybe what's really exciting about this situation. Maybe if there were only 3 people in the gallery, it doesn't happen in the same way, but we're all here, and able to be on the in the architecture of the 2 days, so to speak, is something really exciting about it.
Thank you.
Just want to follow up on this. Sitting on the ruin,
Yeah.
it's also actually gradually erasing it, right? Because of the patina. And I think everybody's going to notice that your pants are all now marked by the artwork. And you're like notorious for discarding your installations, right? Like they're so precious and they're so thoughtful, and you make it impossible for the work to be collected and to be consumed. Like you've taken the idea of entropy to another level, also in the way you produce art. Can you say something about why you have just been kind of so, like why you've embraced this idea that every work you do is going to disappear? I mean, I don't know if that's been the case, but from my understanding.
I mean, I have some work still. I realize, like, I can't continue to always make a new piece. It's exhausting. So I kind of changed but I don't like re-showing old work. Yeah, I don't, I guess there's the part of me that wants to keep moving forward and to keep pushing the work, that I kind of just always lose interest after I have been able to like materialize and visualize and experience a piece. Yeah, but I'm working differently now, so I'm holding on to some pieces. But yes, you will see, like, these vessels also came from the Gardner installation, from like the 75 vessels. So like they do, like work does get like recycled, reincorporated, but these ones are officially done, you know, at the end of this installation, they're gone. But yeah, I think there's just,
And did you have some of these to create the patina?
there's a few that had like a water process, but the others, I was more interested in breaking them.
Hi, Azza. You were also talking, well, you were explaining to me, because I've never worked with slipcast, right? And you were explaining the component in slipcast that makes it kind of impossible to, versus clay, for instance, that you could reuse in a cycle type of way. And this kind of goes in the opposite way, but also it has like material choices. But was there other reasons why, or do you want to talk about this process a little bit?
Oh yeah, so I mean the reason why I chose why I choose slipcast in certain times as opposed to essentially like watering down clay or something so that I can like reconstitute it. Just that it's like I'm not able to reconstitute it. So like as soon as it like dissolves and dries up, it's like done. Yeah, and I think that's just like something that like in this piece and like other pieces is important, but then there have been pieces where it's like clay where it ends up drying out and then getting rehydrated and coming back, so.
Great. If there's no more questions, I think this endpoint of coming back would be great. Great. It would be great to see you back. Great to see you all back, because we'll be having this show on until April 30th, and we'll have a new show starting May 12th. Other things tell us, and I was like, I'm trying to, but I don't know what the date is. May 12th. And yeah, thank you all so much. The artists will still be around. So ask them